The Elephant Road. This is another one in the Heroes of the Wild series by Nicola Davies. Chapter 1. Wyland sat on the back of his uncle Dengu's shiny motorbike. They flew along a road between tall buildings, so fast that the neon signs blurred with their speed. All the lights of the big city spread out in front of them like a feast. Faster and faster they went, so fast that the bike left the ground behind altogether and they began to fly. Thwack! Wyland's head hit the floor of the hut and he woke up. Something had tipped him and his little brother, Relip, out of their bed. They lay together in a heap. So Wyland and Relip. What happened? Relip whispered sleepily. Why is the floor tilted? Relip was right. The slivers of moonlight coming through the palm weave wall showed that the whole room was sloping. The two boys kept still and listened. Something very big was pushing at the corner of the sleeping hut. It made a low rumbling that Wyland felt in his chest rather than heard through his ears, and its deep breaths huffed through the gaps in the walls. It shuffled its feet with a sound like someone moving huge sacks of rice over a dusty floor and pushed the hut further over. The bamboo framework creaked and groaned, and the boys rolled around like beans in a box. They came to rest against the far wall, and Relip cried out, "Stop it! Stop it! Go away! Whatever you are, just go away!" Wyland thought that shouting might make whatever it was cross, and that it would be better to stay quiet. But when he put his fingers to his brother's lips to make him hush, Relip pushed his hand away and said, "No, Grandpa says they can understand what we say." So he shouted again, "Go away, go away." So at the beginning, the boy was dreaming that he was on a motorcycle and he was flying around and then he fell off. But what really happened is there's an animal outside their hut knocking it over, and he and his brother fell out of bed. You can guess what it is from the title and the way they're describing its sounds. For a moment, their hut was held as if the animal was contemplating overturning it completely. But as quickly and easily as it had been picked up, it was dropped with a judder. Outside, there was a little more rumbling and shuffling, one long last sigh, and then silence. The boys held their breath. Insects and frogs chirred and plinked in the dark forest. The night had returned to normal. "Told you they could understand us," whispered Relip. Wyland didn't reply. Their father came in from the next room with a lantern. "You all right in here, boys?" His hair was standing up like the leaves of a pineapple, but his voice was calm and strong. As the husband of the village chief, the Nokma, father of the village headman, had to be the leader when things went wrong. "Yes, father," said Relip. "Good. Get back to sleep. There's nothing to worry about. I'm just going to look in on Grandpa and a few other people. We'll check on the damage in the morning," said their father. Mother joined him in the doorway. "Nothing to be afraid of," she said in her reassuring Nokma voice. "They're just passing through like they've done before." She stroked the little bundle flopped on her shoulder and added, "Your little sister didn't even wake up." Wyland and Relip exchanged a smile. Their baby sister's ability to sleep was already a matter of family legend, so it was hardly a surprise that not even an elephant could wake her. So that was chapter 1. And I just want to say that their father is the village chief, called the Nokma. Okay. And I bet there's more information in the back about Nokmas and what that is. I'll show you some of the pictures from the back in a little bit, but let's find out what happened. Chapter 2. Wyland woke up early. He slipped out of his bed and pulled on his school clothes. Relip could sleep on. He was too little to go to school. Outside, the sunlight slanted through the trees and birds called. Wyland liked the cool stillness of the morning when the forest seemed to hold its village in its big green hand. He looked at the ground beside the sleeping hut. There were marks on the hard red mud where the elephant's feet had been. Wyland had seen tracks like this before. Most years, about this time, elephants passed by as they traveled between one forest reserve in the east to another in the west. The reserves are elephant palaces, Grandpa had explained when Wyland was small. We live on the elephant road between them. Living on the road to an elephant palace had seemed to Wyland like something to be very proud of. Wyland's village, called Umiamera, Grandpa had told him, was near a special spot on the elephant's journey, the only place where the riverbanks were low enough to allow the elephants to cross. A narrow wooded valley led from the village at the end of Umiamera to the crossing place, and once in a while, as the elephants passed, they shoved a house and made it shake a bit. Father always grumbled that the elephants should leave the people in peace, but Grandpa said that anyone who lived by a road was bound to see traffic. But in the last few years, the elephants had started to appear more often. Almost every year now, they raided crops at the harvest time or knocked over a storage hut to take the drying maize. Last year, they had trampled in the field and destroyed a whole crop of eggplants. In a village a few miles away, a man had been killed when he tried to chase the elephants out of his crops. The people of Umiamera had begun to worry about these giant visitors. Wyland inspected the corner of the hut that the elephant had pushed. One of the walls was buckled and the end of the hut had been moved by about a half a meter. So they use the metric system to measure. Half a meter is, meters are kind of similar to how we would measure in feet or yards. And there he is, examining the hut, which they said is made of bamboo. Wyland felt a shiver go down his back. It was scary what elephants could do so easily, but it was exciting too. He wished that he had been braver in the night and had peeked out through the weave of the walls to look into the face of the wild elephant. Wyland crossed the clay yard between his family's huts and poked his head around the kitchen door. His mother was cooking and his little sister, strapped to her back, was fast asleep as always. His sister didn't have a proper name of her own yet. She was just called No, like a little girl babies are called at first. Pots bubbled on the stove with all sorts of delicious smells coming out of them. But instead of talking about last night's elephants, his mother frowned. Why are you in your school clothes, Wyland? Wyland's smile went out like a snuffed candle. Of course, it was the holidays. It had been the holidays since before Christmas and would go on being the holidays for another month. He had forgotten. Ever since he had a growth spurt last rainy season, he had been like this, always forgetting the most obvious things. In a few months, he'd shot up 9 centimeters, so his body didn't even feel like it belonged to him anymore. He felt clumsy and awkward. And as for his voice, it had been completely unpredictable. Sometimes it came out in a squeak. Sometimes it came out as a growl. Wyland had almost given up talking altogether to avoid sounding foolish. Grandfather said it was all part of growing up, and that he too had a voice that came and went like a brain like a cloud when he was Wyland's age. But Father wasn't so understanding, and Father would just get cross. Why don't you just think, Father would say when Wyland had forgotten to do his chores again. Or speak up, he would say when Wyland didn't answer his questions. But his mother was more understanding, even if she didn't say much when Father got angry. She smiled kindly at him now and said, just go and get changed. I've got a job for you. Walking to the field along the dirt road would take all morning, so Mother had told Wyland to take a shortcut through the forest. But you'll have to pay attention, Wyland, she warned, so you don't lose the path. And she was right. The path was steep and narrow and rather overgrown. Wyland adjusted the strap on his forehead so that the basket wouldn't slip and spill the food for his father and uncle's breakfast. and concentrated hard where he put his feet. There were huge trees in this old part of the forest, with trunks 2 or 3 times the span of Wyland's arms. The path curved around them, and he had to clamber over the roots. It was mostly quiet in the forest at this cool, dry time of year, so the only sounds were those of Wyland's feet on the dry leaves and pebbles. Then, suddenly, close by, gibbons began to call. They were the family that always stayed near to the village. People liked to hear them. It was a sign that things were going well. Wyland peered up into the canopy. At last, he caught sight of them. The dark-furred father, his 2 almost grown-up sons, and the mother, pale as mist, high up in the banyan tree. They had a new baby in their family, too. Wyland had seen the little scrap, clutched to the gray fur of his mother's belly a week before. Its brothers didn't seem to like him much. They sat around sulkily in the branches nearby and never held the baby, the way he and Relip cuddled their new baby sister. Wyland gazed up, wondering how the Gibbon brothers really felt about their new sibling. Were they as grumpy as they looked, or did they secretly play with him when no human was around? Okay, here's a picture of him walking through the forest. So it looks like the basket has a band that goes around his head, so he carries the basket on his back, and it stays in place by that band that goes around his forehead. And he's probably delivering food, lunch to his, breakfast to his father and his uncle. The gibbon calling was a little half-hearted. In a few minutes, they quieted down and began to move off through the treetops, arm over arm, against the mosaic of leaves. Wyland followed for a while, but they moved too fast. They disappeared into the canopy, and his attention came back down to earth. Where was the path? There was no sign of the path at all. He couldn't even remember which way he had come. Should he go to the left or to the right? How had he let his silly brain wander off like that again? Wyland looked all around, calming his beating heart and trying to work out from the position of the sun in which direction he should go. A deep, soft rumble traveled through his body from the ground. Wyland stared ahead and realized that the gray space between the leaves and the branches, just a few meters in front of him, was not gray space at all, but live elephants. As he peered into the greenery, Wyland could just make out their heads, their ears, and their rounded bottoms of at least 3 animals, 1 very large and 2 smaller. A mama and her 2 children. They were pulling leaves down from a tree that was covered with big yellow seed pods. There was no way the elephants hadn't sensed Wyland's presence. They would have heard his noisy footfalls and smelt his human smell. Elephants, after all, didn't have those large, huge ears and big noses for nothing. So either they were just about to rush at him and trample him to death, or they were simply waiting to see what he would do. And here's how he can see them, the big one. It was rather different being close to elephants without the wall of the hut between himself and them. Wyland felt very small and very fragile. He knew that to keep safe, he should move away as quickly and quietly as he could, but he was frozen to the spot with fear and fascination. He was so close that he could actually smell the elephant's warm, vegetable scent and hear the crack and crush of leaves and bark as they lazily took their food. Sunlight dappled through the canopy and for a moment lit up the face of one of the smaller elephants. The creature was perhaps younger than Wyland himself, but still larger than his mother's kitchen. For a fraction of a second, Wyland saw its eye, bright brown, shimmering with life, and felt that it had seen him too. A tingle went through his whole body. Then something startled the mama, and she gave a short trumpet of alarm. Wyland thought his heart would pop out of his mouth. He turned and ran as if all the demons of the underworld were after him. Wow. Okay, that's the end of chapter 1 and 2. And I'm just going to turn to the back And the elephants in this book are Asian elephants. Females weigh as much as a car, and males can weigh twice that much. And I'll post some of these pictures. You can't really see them. The book is in black and white, and it's hard to see. And this story is set in India. Okay, we'll stop there.